Hey, welcome back to the ITC located right here in the ABICAR Benzels US headquarters. So in the last couple of videos, we started off with a pretty straightforward continuous weld with a rigid backstop. Video number 2 showed us how to use the magnetic guide rail. In this one, we're going to do a vertical weld. So the setup steps are pretty similar. So if you want to go back to those previous videos and review that, please do. A great question came in and we're asking about vertical up welding with the ABICAR. And absolutely you can do it. Now there's a couple different ways we can do it. We can use just the standard guide arms up against like a rigid guide situation. Now, just like in the horizontal application, we want to have a little bit of an angle of attack. Just to refresh your memory, angle of attack, we want the leading arm just one notch shorter than the trailing arm. Okay, but now if we're doing vertical, a couple things unique that you have to kind of keep in mind. Always keep it tied off. We may want to make sure that it doesn't fall, damage the equipment, or hurt anyone. So the simplest and the recommended way to do it is using the magnetic guide track. So remember, we want these guide arms on the same hole. We want 0 angle of attack, okay? This has to make sure that we are parallel with the seam that we're trying to weld. We have our connections made. We have the power plugged in. And we have the arc trigger lead tied in, right? So it'll tell the welding power unit to start and stop the arc. We're going to set up the rough torch position using these clamps, okay? Now here's where it gets a little unique. You want to make sure this cross slide is on the bottom of the ABICAR. Why? Oh, and always make sure that the magnet is turned on. We want this on the bottom side of the direction, okay? And the reason being is we don't want it to rotate and pull this top away while it's driving, okay? So we want to make sure this cross slide's on the bottom. We have the torch roughly positioned. All of our connections are made. We're in neutral and in neutral. The magnet is engaged. We're going to power it on. Just like our previous applications, we're going to set it to about 12 inches per minute. Okay. Put it to the weld position. Start the weld. And it's going to climb. Now this little motor in here is more than strong enough to lift the trigger lead, the power cable, and the welding wire, but you do want to stay and just kind of babysit it and make sure and maybe hold on to this as well as it completes the weld. Now, if you're not using the magnetic guide sections, be very careful about where we want to put the weld lead wire, okay? So if we were set up against a rigid surface here, we're going to want to make that loop towards the seam. Okay. The reason being, if we loop it the other way, the weight of the welding cable could pull the ABICAR away from the seam that we're trying to weld. So without the magnetic track, always make sure that your cable is kind of looped towards the seam. With the magnetic guide track, it's not much of an issue, but always kind of keep an eye on it. Okay, so absolutely the ABICAR Advanced can do a vertical weld. Just a couple things to keep in mind. If you're having issues, always check the connectivity of the trigger lead or the ground. Make sure that you're powering that unit on in neutral, otherwise it'll throw a code. Cable management starts to become an issue if you're not going to use the magnetic guide. It's always preferable to use the magnetic guide just so you're not having to deal with drift of the torch away from the seam that you're trying to weld, but it absolutely can be done either way. Okay, all this information can be found on our website. Please reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns. We'd be more than happy to help. And in the next video, we're going to jump to the ABICAR 1200 Pro. In those videos, we're going to show you how to do some programming. We're going to do some oscillation. We're also going to use a dual torch setup. So stick around. We'll see you next time.